The sound of boots scraping across the wooden floor echoed in the still air of the biker bar. 8 men, tattooed, weathered, and hard-eyed, stood frozen, watching as sunlight poured through the open doorway, cutting across the room like a blade of fire. In that golden light stood a small boy, no taller than the leader's belt buckle. His denim jacket slightly oversized, his red hoodie bright against the shadows. He gripped a long wooden stick with trembling hands, holding it out like a sword. His chest rose and fell quickly, fear flickering behind his determined eyes. He didn't move, didn't blink. His voice cracked the silence when he spoke, soft but steady, like a child forcing bravery through his tears. Tell me who my father is. Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Stories like this one remind us how courage and compassion can change everything. The boy's name was Evan, and for weeks, he had been wandering the dusty highways of that small town, asking questions nobody wanted to answer. His mother had passed away just a month earlier, sick, weak, and whispering secrets in her sleep. Before she died, she'd grabbed his tiny hand and said, "If anything happens to me, find the demons. One of them knows your father." Those words haunted Evan's dreams every night. The demons weren't a myth. They were the toughest motorcycle club around. The kind that made grown men cross the street. But to Evan, they weren't monsters. They were his last chance at knowing the truth. He'd walked for miles to find them. The stick in his hand, not as a weapon, but as a memory of his mother's broom handle, something familiar to hold when the world felt too big. Now standing inside the demon's clubhouse, he was facing the men who could destroy him with a glance. The leader, a broad-shouldered man named Ryder, stepped forward. His vest read, "Demon's President." The white letters like scars against black leather. His jaw tightened as he looked down at the boy. Something in the kid's eyes, something painfully familiar, made him freeze. Evan's voice wavered as he spoke again. "She told me one of you knew my father. Please, I need to know." The men behind Ryder exchanged uneasy glances. The giant of the group, a bald man named Tuck, folded his arms and muttered under his breath, "Kid, you're in the wrong place." But the boy didn't move. His stick lowered slightly, but his gaze didn't. Ryder sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "What's your mother's name?" he asked gruffly. "Lena," Evan said quietly. Lena Hart. That name hit Ryder like a punch to the chest. The noise in the room faded, replaced by the pounding of his own heart. He hadn't heard that name in nearly 9 years. Lena, wild, fearless, and free, had been the only person who ever saw something good in him. She used to wait for him after every bar fight, patching up his knuckles and telling him he wasn't as bad as he thought. And then one night, she disappeared. He never saw her again. Ryder's hands began to tremble slightly as he looked at the boy's hair, his eyes the same shade of brown Lena had. He turned away, pretending to look at the wall. The men were watching him now, waiting. Evan stepped forward, tears welling up, but refusing to fall. "You all knew her, didn't you?" she said. "One of you was my father," he shouted. His voice echoed through the bar, thin but full of hurt. "So tell me who he is." The silence that followed was unbearable. Then, in a voice softer than any of his brothers had ever heard, Ryder said, "She was the only person I ever loved." The room shifted. A couple of the bikers looked down. Ryder's throat tightened as he faced the boy again. "Evan," he said, the name tasting like something sacred. "She left because she didn't want this life for you. She wanted you safe." Evan's lips trembled. "Then why didn't you come for us?" His voice cracked this time. "She was sick. She died alone." That broke Ryder. The man who'd spent decades building a reputation of iron and fire suddenly looked small, like the guilt he'd buried for years was clawing its way back to the surface. He took a slow step toward the boy, his boots creaking on the wooden floor. "Because I didn't know," he whispered. "Lena never told me. I would have found you. I would have." He stopped himself. Words meant nothing. Now, the truth had arrived far too late. Evan's stick dropped to the ground with a dull thud. He stood still, searching the man's face for a lie, for any hint of deception. But all he saw was a man who looked like the broken half of his own heart. Ryder knelt down, bringing himself eye level with the boy. The sunlight behind him softened, wrapping them both in a warm glow. "I can't undo what's been lost," he said. "But I can be here now if you let me." The room was silent except for the hum of the neon sign reading on the bikers, who once looked so untouchable, now stood quietly, humbled by the sight of their leader on his knees before a boy with a wooden stick. Tuck stepped forward, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Kid," he said gruffly, "you've got guts. You just walked into the toughest bar in the state with nothing but that stick. I think you've got more of your old men in you than you know." A faint smile touched Evans's lips for the first time. Days passed. The demons took Evan in, not out of guilt, but out of something deeper, respect. They gave him food, a bed, and stories about the woman who'd once tamed their wildest brother. Ryder spent every day trying to make up for the years he lost, teaching Evan how to ride a small dirt bike, fixing up an old helmet with a hand-painted symbol of wings, the same one Lena used to draw in her notebooks. Slowly, the bar that once echoed with the growl of engines began to echo with laughter. But one night, as the sun dipped below the hills and the bikes lined up outside gleamed in amber light, Ryder sat alone with Evan on the steps. "You know," he said quietly, "your mom used to tell me, kindness was a kind of strength. I never understood that until today." Evan leaned against him, small but steady. "She was right," he said. "You just have to be brave enough to use it." Ryder smiled faintly, his arm wrapping around the boy's shoulders as the sound of distant thunder rolled in the horizon. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, where every story reminds us that no matter how lost someone is, love can still find its way back home. Before you go, tell us in the comments, do you believe people can change if given a second chance? As the night deepened and the bar lights flickered softly against the wooden walls, Ryder looked down at the boy resting against him. The boy who had once stood trembling with a stick, demanding the truth. Now that same boy was his reason to keep going. For the first time in years, Ryder felt something he thought he'd buried long ago. Peace. Because sometimes the smallest voice in the darkest place carries the power to heal even the hardest of hearts.